Live from SABC headquarters in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Welcome to this midweek edition of The Watchdog. My name is Vuyo Mvogo, and on the show tonight, Gift of the Givers to the rescue as Gauteng's water crisis spirals out of control, creating a headache for the province's already stretched public health system. Several health facilities across the country's most populous province have been affected, and those who have witnessed the extent of the problem now fear the worst. We also look at another province of our country that's facing a crisis of a different kind. Eastern Cape Police are battling unknown criminals who are terrorizing communities and higher education institutions. More than a dozen people were brutally killed in the past 4 days, while at Fort Hare University, people are still living in fear after attempts on the life of the Vice-Chancellor failed but ended in the death of his bodyguard. Is anything being done? Do Eastern Cape Police even know what they are dealing with? We speak to the province's police department. The Watchdog starts now. Humanitarian organization, the Gift of the Givers, has had to step in and help the sick and the elderly. This as taps at several Gauteng hospitals ran dry. With an empty reservoir, Gauteng Hospital in Atteridgeville, Pretoria, today received thousands of liters of water just so that patients can do such things as drink or take their medication. Gift of the Givers is also trying to help Rahima Musa as well as Helen Joseph hospitals. My colleague Nozindombi Mia spent some time at both Helen Joseph Hospital and at Charlotte Maxeke. She joins me now in the studio. Good evening. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me, Vuyo.
You went, and what did you see?
Yeah. You know, Vuyo, the situation at Helen Joseph specifically, on the outside, it does look like it's business as usual. But when you start speaking to some of the staff, specifically the nurses, the cleaning staff, the administration staff, they paint a different picture. The wards where the patients are in absolute dire, disgusting environment. The toilets are not working because there's no water. And now, obviously, the situation is not as a result of Helen Joseph's making. It is a result that they're now dealing with as a result of the load shedding issue. But as it stands now, they just don't seem to have the capacity to be able to pump sufficient water to be able to flush out those toilets and clean out those toilets. What's interesting about Helen Joseph is that they actually do have a borehole that was put in place early last year. And that has helped them to quite a large extent with being able to have water for the visitors that come in, water in areas that are such as casualty and in some of the high-risk areas. So they do have access to water, but the water temperature is very, very low. So the water's coming out quite slowly, but it is clean water. We do also know that Gauteng Infrastructure Department assisted them with a water tanker. But it's only one water tanker, and they need quite a number of liters of water to be able to get enough water that will be able to pump at a rate that is sufficient to be able to flush that out. So we are seeing the start of a humanitarian issue if it doesn't get resolved at Helen Joseph. We know that the public hospitals that have been impacted by the water issue as a result of load shedding are struggling already from historic issues that they're dealing with, infrastructure, capacity, and such. So now you find that you know,
the situation is only worsened.
It's
what
becoming
was a bad situation,
even worse.
To begin with. Was the situation, that was Helen Joseph Hospital, was the situation any different at Charlotte Maxeke?
It was actually night and day, to be quite honest with you. We do know that Charlotte Maxeke is one of those hospitals that has been exempt from load shedding. It was exempt around September last year, and they're now able to use electricity, but they do also have a generator. But it's also impacted on water. So the water temperature, the water's ability to come out is quite low, right? The water pressure is quite low. However, they're able to circumvent that by using the generators that they have, and the fact that when they do get cut off from the grid, there is a backup for them. So it's slightly easier for patients at Charlotte Maxeke. We spoke to one guy who said...
That is the case at Helen Joseph.
Yes, at Charlotte Maxeke, we spoke to a guy who himself was a patient there, and he said that it was a bit of a struggle last week because he was due to do surgery, but they called the surgery off, and they said he has to come back this week because there was a problem at the facility. But in terms of comparing the two hospitals, there needs to be more assistance given to Helen Joseph. Charlotte Maxeke is doing what it can under the circumstances, but you know, those hospitals along along Empire Road, you know, the West Rand side, Helen Joseph, Rahima Musa, those hospitals are hospitals that definitely need assistance. They're in the communities, those communities, Crosby, Brixton, the whole line of communities there. There are people that come there on a regular basis, and those are hospitals that need to be priority hospitals, and they need to be prioritized effective before the end of the day today, because it is inhuman conditions that patients are dealing with.
No, I mean, from what the gift of the givers have told us, I mean, they did help Galafong in Atteridgeville. They brought in, you know, hundreds of, liters of, thousands of liters of water, but they were now trying to help both Rahim Musa and Helen Joseph, we are told, but the work there is only just beginning, and it takes us to your point that these are the hospitals that are actually in dire need. We'll see what comes out of that. But from your conversations with staff, with the doctors, with the nurses, do they have the confidence that the situation may change anytime soon?
You know, historically with them...
I hope at least.
Historically, with a lot of the staff having experienced a lot of friction sometimes with authority figures, hope is very low. And the fact that we have an NGO such as Gift of the Givers stepping into a function that government should be providing, it does not speak well as to the responsiveness, the capacity that local government has, provincial government has. They should have put in place contingency measures. The water issue has been an ongoing issue since last week. It is unacceptable that patients are having to sit in filth because we are not seeing government coming to the party. It should not have to be that the Minister of Water and Sanitation is making proclamations that they're going to intervene after the fact. It should be that the staff, the management of the hospitals are proactive. They are doing what they can. One of the private hospitals just around the corner from the SABC has been bringing in water trucks quite regularly since the start of the water crisis. We need to start seeing a lot more proactiveness, not just from national or provincial, but also from management. There's CEOs, there's heads of departments. There needs to be tangible conversations that are had in those affected hospitals where they start planning and dealing proactively with issues such as these, and not leaving it to a situation right now where it's dire and we're seeing patients posting on Facebook the filth that they're living in, the filth that they're experiencing. It sort of is an indictment in terms of how our leadership is dealing with the a budding humanitarian crisis?
We did try, to get a sense, from people who are supposed to be in the know, at the very least, about whatever it is that has been or is being put in place to try and avoid an even bigger catastrophe than what we're seeing now from, people who are there, who are posting the filth you're talking about and the conditions that they have to stay under at those hospitals. But thank you very much for your time. We visited a couple of the affected hospitals this afternoon. Rand Water officials we contacted couldn't come on the program. They say they are in meetings dealing with this crisis. We also tried the health department, also without much success. But the DA's Shadow Minister of Health in Gauteng, Jack Bloom, was kind enough to agree to come on. He joins me on the line. Mr. Bloom, good evening. Thanks very much for your time.
Good evening. Good to be with you.
From what you've been able to ascertain, how did we get here?
Well, as usual, the Gauteng Health Department is reactive. They're not proactive. You could have seen this coming a long time back. In fact, I raised this issue a full year ago. What measures, I asked, are you taking because of the threat of water shedding? We have load shedding, and now we have the equivalent of water shedding, and it's happening at the same hospitals that had happened previously, Helen Joseph and Rahima Musa. And again, a gift of the givers have to step in and bless them for doing it. But really, this is the responsibility of the department. And of course, there are other hospitals that are affected because with load shedding, reservoirs are failing. So Califong Hospital was very severely affected, and they really should be doing what private hospitals are doing, having water tankers on standby and drilling boreholes and making sure that they're working. But of course, this is the Gauteng Health Department. They only react after the fact, and the people who suffer are patients. And it's just unbelievable. Hospitals can't operate without water. Of course, operations are cancelled, infection risk goes up, and to have patients in filth in a hospital is just completely unacceptable.
But what in the system, or in the people who manage the system, is making it difficult, or shall we say impossible even, to do what appears to be the most obvious and basic things to do, given what everyone knows, that load shedding is here to stay, but we've also had water problems. We've had that for quite a while.
Well, part of the problem is that there's a separate department called the Department of Infrastructure Development that is responsible for this sort of thing. And hospital CEOs are disempowered. They don't have the powers to look after their hospitals in the area of infrastructure as much as they should. But I don't think that lets them off the hook. I mean, if you're the CEO of Rahima Musa or Helen Joseph Hospital, you should be jumping up all the time. You should be screaming at the department, quite frankly. You should be exerting pressure. And of course, the Department of Infrastructure Development, unfortunately, is notoriously corrupt and inefficient. They're not known for doing any project on time and within budget. Typically, they get a contractor who overcharges and then doesn't finish the job. So we've got deep-rooted systemic weaknesses in both the Gauteng Health Department and the Department of Infrastructure Development. But, it's time that this stopped. I mean, we need to put good people in the top positions, efficient people, non-corrupt people, people who are honest, and get the job done. We're facing so many challenges now, and with water shedding and continued load shedding, I really think we need better management. We need emergency measures now at the moment, because that's what you have to do. But, plan ahead and think ahead. There are other hospitals that are also going to be affected.
But then, I mean, there are constitutional structures like or creations that are meant to, get people or whip people into line, or at the very least expose those who aren't doing their jobs. And one of them is a committee that you belong to, which is supposed to play its oversight role. And I'm talking here about the committee that the legislature set up to look after health issues and to play that oversight role. Is it not doing that?
Well, I ask questions perpetually, and I did ask questions about what they were doing about water shedding. The health committee does call in the department to account, but at the end of the day, the department has to do their job, and they don't do their jobs. And, I often compare the Gauteng Health Department to Eskom, unfortunately. There's just so many layers of mismanagement, criminal networks. We've already seen the revelations that up to R1 billion was stolen from the Tembisa Hospital. A whistleblower, Babita Dearkran, was murdered because she was pointing out all the corruption. I mean, that's what you're dealing with. It's a deep-seated problem. I don't see, frankly, the political will to tackle it. I think there needs to be a wholesale change of top management at the Gauteng Health Department. And until that happens, we're going to continue to have maladministration and failures. And the people who suffer are doctors and nurses and patients. Again this week, in reply to a question of mine, we found out that there's more than 36,000 people waiting for surgery. Now, those waiting lists are going to get even longer because, surgery is cancelled because of a simple thing like water availability, and they don't have clean linen. This is just so basic that hospitals should have clean water and sanitation, and we're not even getting the basics right. So that's where we are, unfortunately. I think that the executive of this province needs to do their job, and they're not.
I mean, I get you. I mean, you do ask questions, and you've done that for a very a long time. But, what I'm trying to understand is whether the rest of your colleagues in the health committee do actually do what they are supposed to do. Is that committee playing its oversight role?
Well, we get quarterly reports, we get an annual report, and we ask the officials to appear before us, and they tell us that they're doing things, and they're not doing things. This is a department that every year the Auditor General issues the most scathing opinions about them, and every year you can say, the Constitution has all these safeguards like oversight committees, the Auditor General, the Public Service Commission, the Public Protector, and, some of them try to do their jobs, but at the end of the day, when you have incapable people, when you have dishonest people, I have to say, when you have criminal networks in place, it's just very, very difficult to turn around that department. As I said earlier, it reminds me of Eskom, that, you really need to take a surgical scalpel to the Gauteng Health Department, get rid of all these corrupt and incompetent people, and put in decent people who can get the job done. I've got a big complaint is that I think many of the CEOs at hospitals are political appointments. Now, what can you do when there's cadre deployment, which is an official policy of the ruling party, and that needs to stop. The Constitution is there to be used, but unfortunately, if the executive ruling party of this province doesn't do what needs to be done, that's what we get.
Now, I mean, if the situation is as hopeless, it'll appear, as you just described it, what do you think the rest, of us should then do? Because the last thing we will want is another tragedy of the scale we saw in, with the Esidimeni episode, for example. What's there to leverage on in terms of what communities, in terms of what professionals, in terms of what NGOs can actually do? And I mean, if you look back at the past 10 years. And there's been, litigation has also helped a great deal, whipped people into line, or just gotten people to do the things that they are supposed to do. Just as a legislator and someone who has been in the space for quite some time, what's left? In other words, what's there for us to use that perhaps we may not be using or utilizing at this stage? Because, as I was saying at the beginning, we can't wait for a tragedy before we can do anything about the situation. It's a ticking time bomb.
No, absolutely. And, hats off to Give to the Givers and other NGOs that step in because government isn't doing their job. But, I really think that we're a democracy and we have elections coming up next year. And quite frankly, the remedy is a change of provincial government and a change of national government as well. I really think that the present ruling party is just shown itself to be a failure in every way. If you can't provide electricity, if you can't provide water, then you really don't have the legitimacy to rule. And I think voters must be more active. I think people need to work for political change. They need to change their vote. They need to vote for parties that will do a better job. But quite frankly, after all these years of ANC rule, we're not getting anywhere. I just don't have any faith in all these promises anymore, and I think we need political change, but that can only happen next year. We're going to have to do the best we can until then.
Well, back to the here and now. We did try to get the MEC of Health. We did also try to get the Rand Water as well, but of course, needless to say, we didn't succeed. But from the bits and pieces you've been able to pick up, is there any work going on behind the scenes where people are trying to put their heads together to try and avoid a catastrophe?
Well, the DA has been warning about the water situation in Gauteng, and we've advocated various measures that should have already have been done. In terms of the government is now mulling, calling a national state of disaster over the electricity situation. Of course, the problem there is that we don't want what happened with emergency legislation, what happened under COVID, where people just stole everything. So I do think that we need to get rid of the red tape. That's really the problem in a lot of the electricity situation. And we need to act with speed, but we also need to act with integrity and honesty. So the DA has proposed an oversight mechanism. If we do go to a state of disaster, that we have safeguards, that the money and projects are spent on what they should be spent. But as we've seen previously, there are people out there, when they see money voted for emergency projects, all they think about is how they can get their hands in it. Now, we can't allow that to happen. And I think people need to be active, people need to be vocal. And yes, we rely on brave whistleblowers who are often not treated as well as they should be. But I think people of goodwill need to come forward. We need to know what the real situation is and get us through this period. We can't keep going on playing catch-up all the time. We do need to have a government that looks ahead, plans ahead, and puts in adequate contingency measures. And certainly they've been caught with their pants down, because you could have seen this coming a long time ago, that along with electricity problems, we get water problems. So I really hope to see some decent action in the near future. But as I said, I think next year are elections, and voters need to make their feelings known.
Let's leave it there for tonight. Let me thank you very much for your time, Mr. Bloom. Jack Bloom, who is the DA's Shadow MEC for Health in Gauteng, kind enough to come on this evening to talk about this issue. As I was saying earlier, we did try the MEC for Health, in the province. We also tried Rand Water as soon as we heard that the situation was getting worse and worse, but none could come. Hopefully, they will still consider our request and come on, even if it's just to assure the people of this province, but also those people who are sick, lying in those hospitals, waiting to receive attention. But you had this Nozindombi, Mia, our colleague was describing earlier, people are really panicking because of the filth that they now have to put up with at these hospitals. Hopefully someone is going to step in and help the efforts of people like the Gift of the Givers and ensure that the situation doesn't actually get worse than it has gotten up until now. After the break, we'll look at another province that is experiencing a different set of problems. Let's look now at another province of our country that's facing a different, or shall I say, a crisis of a different kind. Eastern Cape Police are battling unknown criminals who are terrorizing communities and higher education institutions in that province. About a dozen people were brutally killed in the past 4 days, while at Fort Hare University, people are still living in fear after attempts on the life of the Vice-Chancellor failed, but ended in the tragic death of his bodyguard who was pelted with bullets. Is anything being done? Do Eastern Cape Police even know what they are dealing with here? Well, the Provincial Commissioner of Police is on leave at the moment, but Brigadier Kinana is the SAPS's head of communications in the Eastern Cape. He joins me on the line. Brigadier, good evening. Thanks very much for your time.
Good evening, Vuyo, and to the viewers at home.
Let's start, if you will, with the situation at Fort Hare, which we've been dealing with for, especially over the past couple of weeks, on the back, of course, of that tragic event when the bodyguard of the Vice-Chancellor of Fort Hare University was gunned down in what was clearly, an attempt at the Vice-Chancellor's own life. Has there been any breakthrough? Do you know anything? Can you share anything with us with respect to what has happened since that incident a couple of weeks ago?
Thank you very much for the opportunity. We really appreciate it. That you have afforded us an opportunity to share with our communities, to share our concerns, our efforts, and the progress that we are making in terms of our investigations. Indeed, the case of Fort Hare, sent shockwaves in our communities, and especially in that institution of Fort Hare. I must indicate that you will recall that in a few weeks back, the leadership was meeting with the leadership of the institution, and certain decisions were taken there in terms of what the way forward should be in investigating the case. As I speak, there isn't much detail that I can give you in relation to the case. We haven't made any arrests at this stage. However, I must indicate that a multidisciplinary task team was set up, which of course consists of some resources that were drawn from the national office. As I speak, that team is sitting in the province and is doing its work. And we are hoping that at an appropriate time, we will then hear what the outcome of the investigation is.
Have you gotten any, or have they gotten any leads at least? Or are they still find a
I wouldn't, because of the sensitivity of the investigation, we don't want to report, give reports piecemeal. We want to give them an opportunity to do their investigation so that at the end of the day, we can hear from them what is it that they have gathered so far, and whether any breakthrough is likely to be made or has been made. But that announcement will be made once the investigating team has given the feedback to the management.
Now, what makes a lot of people a bit skeptical and what gets people to resign to the fact that what makes them believe that nothing is happening or nothing will happen anytime soon is the fact that, certainly from what we're told by the university's vice chancellor and of course other people at the university, is that there have been other cases that are supposed to be investigated or that are supposed to have been investigated, and nothing has come of those cases. And that's why it then becomes difficult for people to believe people like you when you say there's a task team that has been put together, it's doing its work, let's give it some time, and so on and so forth. Because if progress had been made that we could point to with regard to the previous cases that had already been reported, some of them apparently a while ago, and then people would probably be inclined to believe that indeed progress is being made and that it's a matter of time before we see the culprits behind bars.
Indeed, I must acknowledge the fact that people must be concerned about the progress. They must be concerned about the fact that there has not been any arrest as yet. However, I must indicate at the same time that investigations are a process, and in most cases we are dependent on the information that would have been gathered, that is brought to the attention of the investigators. If we do not have, a substantial information that is likely to get the case, to the prosecuting authority, to the courts, then that causes some kind of, delays, in the investigation. But I'm standing here to say that people must trust us, that we are doing a good job behind the scene. And as I indicated earlier, that at an appropriate time, we will come back to them and say, this is what we've got. It's normal. We know the anxieties that are there. We know people must be concerned that something must happen now. But I can promise you that with the established team that has been, set up by the management, something positive is going to happen.
Of course, you're also aware that when no progress is being made, that leads to all sorts of speculation. People start saying, oh, well, could well be that the police are in cahoots with the criminals behind this, or the politicians who may be implicated, and so on and so forth. And what that also does is to, kill whatever hope that people may have in our police.
Of course, the such delays sometimes, they do actually cause, such speculations, anxiety, and people kind of losing hopes. But that which is the reason why we continuously give give updates in terms of what progress we are making in terms of the investigation. I think that we should take the SAPS into our confidence, especially with the establishment of the team that is busy investigating. That multidisciplinary team consists of various, units within the SAPS, most of whom are drawn from the national office experts, different experts, forensic and so on, intelligence and so on. They are working with the local, team that has been working on these cases. And I can assure you that something positive at the end of the day is going to be realized, and all of us will be happy to see it. Unfortunately, the processes must be followed. Investigation is actually a process, a meticulous process that must be followed so that we don't lose cases in our courts.
Now, on Sunday, about 7 people were brutally killed in Nelson Mandela Bay. That same day, 3 other people were brutally killed at and near a tavern, same township. Yesterday, 73-year-old woman was also killed in New Brighton. Now, this has created a panic in Nelson Mandela Bay. Do the police have any idea as to what's going on there?
The reality is that there are areas in our province which we regard as hotspots. There are certain categories of crime that seem to be rampant. And this is despite all the relentless efforts that we are making together with our partners and stakeholders in the area. However, I must indicate that we are not sitting back. We are not backing off. We are not yielding to the tricks and devices of the criminals in that area. As I speak, there is much deployment that has been made there even before Christmas and New Year. We have our NIU there. We have our TRT. We have a lot of forces, that have been deployed there, and that is in response to the situation that we are seeing in Nelson Mandela, and which is, day by day is becoming volatile. And I think that I can commit here that at the end of the day, we shall have the last word as the SAPS in the area. As I said, we are not yielding to the tricks of the criminals. In some cases, we have made arrests, and except for the recent cases, and there's a task team that has been set there, which is following the leads, which is also making sure that those that are responsible for that devastations in those families get arrested and face the law.
Oh, we can only hope at this stage, but thank you very much for your time this evening, Brigadier Kinana, who is the SAPS's head of communications in the Eastern Cape. In a minute, I'm joined by the Deputy Mayor of Nelson Mandela Bay. We'll stay with that story we also spoke about with Brigadier Kinana just now. And tomorrow, Nelson Mandela Bay Municipality councillors will host a memorial service for the victims of Sunday's mass shooting in Kwazakele, and that's where 7 people died on Sunday. The assailants walked into a house in the Kwazakele township where people were celebrating the birthday of one of the deceased. The murderers shot at whoever was in front of them, killing 7 and injuring several others. One is still battling for his life. Now, police in Gqeberha are also investigating a triple murder following a shooting incident on the same day. And hours later, they were called in on another murder scene in the same township, and that's where 2 people had died, and later a third one also died at a nearby house. Yesterday, a 73-year-old woman was killed in the nearby township of New Brighton by two unknown gunmen. Now, the township is on tenterhooks. The deputy mayor of Nelson Mandela Bay is Mr. Mkhuseli Jack. He joins me on the line from Gqeberha. Good evening, sir. Thanks very much for your time. How would you describe the situation in the Bay on the back of these incidents that took place over the past few days?
Thank you very much for the opportunity. And the situation is very tense. People are very scared. People feel very much vulnerable at this moment. And obviously, first of all, I wish to extend the condolences of the Metro to all the people that lost their lives in the last month of January, and especially also to those who just lost their lives over the weekend.
Now, from what the police just told us, they are busy trying to follow leads. There are people who are working on the case, but from conversations with the ratepayers, do they have confidence in the police and the ability to arrest these people sooner rather than later?
The minister, when he was there, he did try to raise the morale of the people, but unfortunately, he was very few people. And together with his entourage of top brass in the police force, he was convincing, and I was personally happy about their efforts. However, due to the number of murder cases, assassinations, and this last massacre, the people do not believe anything anymore now. People start to really doubt the capacity, the capabilities of the police. And I think maybe a swift arrest of these culprits could assist a lot in assuring the people about the capacity of the police. I thought that, in my view, I had the opportunity to speak also to the minister, and I felt like he did listen to what we have been talking about in the last 2 years, roaming murderers around, especially in the northern areas where they killed hundreds of people. Especially this year, the numbers are very close to 30 in Nelson Mandela alone, if you add this massacre. So the situation is dire, but the police yesterday also, they assured us that the situation is under control. We must leave it to them. What we have to do as a community is just to work with them and support them and give them information and stop spreading rumors, because that will make the culprits escape. And that approach, I think I agree with it, but I think that something drastic and dramatic from the highest level in the country needs to be seen being done in order to assure the residents of Nelson Mandela Bay.
Now, it's, of course, not the first time that there has been these kinds of killing, as you just said. And, I mean, you were involved once upon a time in efforts to try and get to the bottom of this, but also mobilize the community so that, you know, everyone reads from the same page, but also, you know, put their time and effort behind the initiatives at the time to try and deal. What lessons were you able to learn from that experience, if we were to take a few steps back? We're not saying the situation is the same right now, but you know, something happened and the community tried to deal with it, and community leaders like yourself got involved or were part of those efforts.
Vuyo, that was around about 2016 and 2015 when this kind of phenomenon was happening, especially in the area of New Brighton and Soweto on Sea, where young people were chasing each other with machine guns. If they arrive, they didn't care who is in the house, they kill everybody. It was very senseless. And then some few women in the township led by Vuyelwa Pressure, those people, they approached me and said, "Nkusela bantwana bayafa, something must be done. You can't sit and be idle about this." And of course, it was quick. I did mobilize the people, the police, and everybody. And it was a great success. We had the minister there, came to these meetings 3 times. And until politics kicked in, when they realized that, oh, it was a wrong person from a wrong party, all of a sudden, everybody was called back, including the mayor then, Ben, who was also enthusiastic about this. Because Ben, remember how we dealt with the lumpen proletariat during the 1980s. It is easy. It is very easy. You don't have to get even the entire community. You just organize dedicated people and you work together. You track these criminals and very quickly they will disappear. As things stand now, these criminals are breeding more dangerous criminals every day simply because we say, okay, I leave it to the police, or you want to see who is taking the fight, and then if it's somebody you do not favor, you feel like, it's not me as yet. It's not my business. But once it becomes your business, it becomes your permanent and the final business. And I think that, yes, now it looks to me that this event have shocked the public, have shocked the residents, and I think people are going to understand that, okay, the police are the people who have to do the job, and we have no choice but to cooperate with them, give the police the information. Don't give it to anybody else because it's not going to help. Just take it straight to the investigating officer as the generals have told us what to do.
But back then, 6 or so years ago, were you able to put a finger on what lay behind this phenomenon back then?
Yes, it was. Then it was sort of like a non-political thing. It was not really to do with tenders. It was just about bravado of young people trying to show that I can shoot better than you. But the thing is, when they were doing that, they were killing innocent people. They didn't even a shebeen. They killed, like in a red location or white location, I remember, they killed more than 8 people. People who had nothing. They were looking for one person. They didn't even find that person there. That was a phenomenon. It was very bad, and everyone was scared when that was happening. And we stopped it anyway.
How? In other words, what happened? Did you bring these people together?
No, because
yeah.
You see, these things, we use the same method we used during the struggle, whereby you rely on the public. If the public trusts their leaders, the public will tell the leaders what is happening. And then take that information, of course, today, we will take it to the police, but then we were not taking it to the police. But then the police that we're working with until, like I said, it was blatant political interference by the party in power that led really to breaking that thing. And then they were prepared that nothing must happen. But luckily by that time, together with the police that I was working with and everybody, we had already cracked the criminals, and slowly that thing was, it fizzled away. But
But right now, as things stand, would you say there is trust between, the people of the townships and their leaders to a point where they can freely volunteer information, trust that they will act on or you guys will act on the information? Is that trust there as we speak?
Well, it is whether I don't know whether it was due to the shock, but it appears to me, as the general of the local police here was explaining, that recently the community of Utnik assisted the police in cracking those assassinations that were taking in the Karyaga area. Then here in Gqeberha, the experience seemed to be different. People seem to think that, no, it's not my business. But what they don't understand is if it's not your business, it is going to make itself your business. So yeah, I think that we are working. We are going to, with the councillors that are involved a lot in these activities and backing the mayor and everybody being involved and speaking the same language this time around. I think we are going to be able to crack it.
Well, let's hope that that trust can be re-established, hopefully sooner rather than later. The Deputy Mayor of Nelson Mandela Bay, together with his fellow councillors, they'll be hosting a memorial service for the victims of Sunday's mass shooting, where assailants walked into the house in KwaZakele and shot 7 people, injuring several others. And that's what brings us to the end of tonight's program. Do join us again tomorrow evening, same time. Have a good night.